Okay, it is 9 o'clock, everybody. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our community members that have joined us today, any visitors, guests, and we have Ruby from the Argus joining us again to our October 2019 council meeting. If anyone is joining us for the first time, please understand that this is an open meeting of council for the public to observe council in its decision-making process. Everyone, including guests in the gallery, please check your mobile phones and devices are turned to silence, please, so we're not interrupted by phones. Thank you. It is a requirement that I state to all present that Kempsey Shire Council's Code of Meeting Practice includes live streaming, and your attendance at this meeting is taken as consent to the possibility that your image and or voice may be recorded and broadcast to the public via our live stream. And also be aware, according to Council's Code of Meeting Practice, in regard to any other audio or visual recordings of the meetings, prior permission must be sought prior to the meeting, and the decision to allow must be a unanimous decision of the Council or any committee of Council. For people in the gallery that are following, the recommendations before Council will be displayed on the screens to the side and behind me. And later on in the morning, we'll be welcoming 8 new members into the Australian community at approximately 10 o'clock. Their families will be joining us and the candidates in chambers. At approximately 10:15, meeting standing orders will be suspended for the swearing-in ceremony. And at the conclusion of the ceremony, we will have morning tea and everyone is invited to join us then. So welcome everybody to our councillors, our Acting General Manager Stephen Mitchell, our Acting Directors Harper and Fuller, and to all the staff that are in the chambers this morning. And welcome to the public that are viewing to the October 2019 Ordinary Meeting of Kempsey Shire Council. We begin our meeting at item number 1, which is our opening prayer and our acknowledgement of country. Dear Lord, help us in our deliberations today so that our decisions will be for the greater good for the whole of the Kempsey Shire.
Amen.
Amen. And Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Dunghutti people. Apologies and applications for leave of absence by councillors. We have 2 apologies this morning, one from Councillor Sue McGinn and one from Councillor Mark Baxter.
Second that.
It's been moved by Councillor Patterson and seconded by Councillor Saul. All in favour of accepting these leave of absence?
Aye.
That's carried. Confirmation of minutes. We do have... thank you. It's been... Do I have a seconder? We just need the amendments.
The amendment is to remove Councillor McGinn from having voted for item 9.2 because she was absent from the meeting and was recorded as an apology. She's listed as having voted for that item.
They're onto it.
Okay.
Got it.
9.2. It's on page 11.
You need to be at the meeting, Councillor.
Yes, but I noticed that she was voting when she wasn't there. It's official.
So that's been... We're all good? It's been moved, it's been seconded. All in favour of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Thank you. Any disclosure of interests? Yes, Councillor Saul.
Madam Mayor, I wish to close 2 interests. The first one being 9.1, the SALEYARDS Strategic Management Options Report. Madam Mayor, I own property within 3 kilometres of the SALEYARDS, so I'll be declaring a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in that. And the second item is item 9.7, the outdoor dining approvals. I will be declaring in that instance a pecuniary interest. I will take no part in discussion or the voting on an issue. I'll leave the chambers.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shields.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in 9.1 as a user of the SALEYARDS.
Thank you, councillors. Any more declarations of interest? We move on to item number 6, which items passed by exception. We
With withdrawals of 9.3, 9.6 and 9.7 and 11.3. I move that 11.3 be moved forward to the government committee. That's the first item.
Thank you, councillor. And it's being seconded by Councillor Shields. So with the items to be passed by exception, we have 8.1, 8.2, 9.2.
Madam Mayor, could I withdraw some as well, please?
Yes,
I'm just trying to keep up with what Councillor Morris withdrew, and I've kind of lost it.
9.3, 9.6, 9.7, 11.3.
Their removal for changing the recommendation, potentially, yes.
Yeah, 8.2 and 9.2, Madam Mayor. Did you withdraw 9.6, Councillor Morris?
Yes.
9.9 and 9.10 and 11.1.
So we have 8.1, 9.4, 9.5, which is the KLEP, 9.8, and 11.2.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Saul, you have your light on.
Oh,
Do we have any questions for 8.1, 9.4, 9.5, 9.8 or 11.2?
One question, Madam Mayor. 11.3, the rescission motion, that was withdrawn?
yes.
So that's confidential?
Yes.
So we have to go into confidential straight up if that's what's happening. Thank you.
Yes. Because we've moved that forward, so we will need,
Any problem with moving it forward?
yeah.
So it'd be better off to leave it till after the main business.
Yeah, I agree.
Madam Mayor, I change that and I request that we have a motion to move 11.3 to be held no later than 9:45. So if the meeting is still progressing at 9:45, we suspend standing orders and move to 11.3.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you. It's been seconded by councillor. Yeah, all in favour. We have our, thank you.
Madam Mayor, there is one other item, which is your mayoral minute, which isn't on any of the lists.
No,
And
I
it's
don't.
not even, so we just need to be mindful of the fact that that has to be considered at some stage as well.
And it will be considered first. It will be considered now. I can bring a mayoral minute at any stage. So I'm bringing item 7.1. The plan to save our recycling. The reason I'm bringing it forward, and it is a late report, is this campaign came forward at the conference we were at last week. If we leave it until the next month's meeting, it means that we may not be included in the campaign because it's already started and it's going full force. It's quite a lengthy recommendation. I take it that all councillors have read it, and it is to start working on what we need to do to get our recycling and the right amount of money that we need from the state government, from our levies that we pay, back to local government. There is a short video that was played at the conference that we will show to start the campaign. I don't know if there's any questions that councillors may have. You got a question?
Yeah, what a question, Madam Mayor. We moved a similar motion unanimously at, I think, November council meeting last year, and in that motion we moved that we write letters to a whole lot of people. My question is, have there been replies, and what was the response of the government to those letters we wrote last year?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, all those letters that were in that council resolution were written and sent. I'm not aware of any responses that were received, but we'll follow that up and can give a conclusive response to that after the meeting.
We'll just show this short video that was launched at the conference and we'll be using also in our endeavours to make sure that Plan to Save Our Recycling is a campaign that's as successful as what the libraries one has been.
This is not a bottle, it's a t-shirt. And this isn't a bag, it's a bench. Or another bag. New South Wales is being overrun by recycling. But when people see a pile of rubbish, I see something else. Waste is a product, not a problem. Instead of sending it overseas, we can recycle it right here, turning it into things our state needs. New South Wales already collects more than $700 million every year for recycling. If we invest this back, we'll create a circular economy where we use what we waste and turn this into this. So come on, New South Wales, let's educate, innovate and invest to make sure our waste isn't a wasted opportunity.
Thank you for showing that video. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation?
Madam Mayor,
All
can I ask
against? Yes, sorry.
Quickly discuss it.
Yes, if you'd like.
I got a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just as I didn't get to the conference, just updating myself on this. I did see a report where there's a possibility of that this is going towards having up to 7 recycle bins per household. Is that correct? Is that where it's at?
No.
That was actually a news media issue from a study that was undertaken in Victoria, where they were suggesting that up to 8, and it wouldn't be bins, it would be crates, which would be completely unworkable, and it was to have better sorting. But if you've got a decent resource recovery facility, you've got that sorting implemented anyway.
Councillor Morris?
Obviously, I fully support this, and in fact, the Mayor and I had a quick discussion after the presentation down at the conference. It's good to see that it has come up so quickly. What I would like to see in addition, and I know it probably won't be changed, but I'll just float the idea, at the December meeting last year when we moved the series of things in regard to recycling, which Councillor Horville alluded to, we also added another one at the end, and that was that Council proactively seek operators or business opportunities to have a recycling facility within Kempsey. I know that's not there, but and I don't think it needs an amendment, but that was put on the back burner to say it was business as usual. I think with this funding opportunity, or with this opportunity coming up, we really need to put that in the forefront. We need to be looking for the maximum opportunities to get a business operator. We are ideally placed with interchanges and land at Cundabung. When thinking about it, a perfect site would be where the RMS office was as a major recycling facility, whether it be to reprocess plastic or to crush glass for use as sand or for pipe bedding or for material in asphalt. But we need to be proactively looking to maximise the potential for a facility within Kempsey which will drive jobs.
Madam Mayor, could I add to that, please?
Yes, certainly.
The actual, I've put it up here on my iPad. The point 8 was that our council proactively works with commercial waste recycling and reprocessing operators to seek the establishment of waste recycling facilities in the Kempsey local government area. So I guess we moved that, but I'm just wondering, do we know, have there been any success in getting anyone or any waste operator to consider coming here?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. No, there hasn't at this stage. Some of those pieces of work in terms of our overall waste strategy, we are now better resourced in terms of having an additional person in that team, and some of that strategic work will now be able to be undertaken.
I might just add to that in the conversation that many local government areas, or most of them in regional New South Wales, are looking at exactly the same thing. There's a lot of work being done around that in country mayors. We've started that conversation, and also through the JOs, and our JO particularly has got waste as one of our strategic priorities. the research that goes into whether one can be established, how it can be established, the business cases are quite lengthy and involved and quite expensive to do. So I think a regional approach statewide will benefit us all if we work together and don't go out one-on-one.
It would be nice to be on the front foot and actually get one.
It would be. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against the recommendation? The recommendation has been carried. Lost my page. 8.1. Councillor Horval?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The Australia Day Awards Committee, is that what we're up to?
Australia Day Awards, there's a recommendation that the information be noted. You don't move it. Does anyone move it? Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? It's been seconded. Councillor Horval has an amendment.
I was going to move it, but that's okay, Madam Mayor. I actually spoke up first, but that's fine. I was going to move this motion, but it's now going to be an amendment. In regard to the Australia Day Committee report submitted to this council, meeting of council, we resolve that it commends the report of the Australia Day Committee. 2, letters be sent by the Deputy Mayor to all committee members, thanking them for their diligence in the work they have done. And number 3, the date for the 2020 Australia Day Awards and Australia Day Citizenship Ceremony be held on the actual day, 26th of January.
Do I have a seconder?
I'd like to speak and explain them.
You need a seconder, Councillor.
Yes, and I haven't.
I'll second because I believe the first two are worth.
Thank you,
The third
Councillor.
one is implied in the notes.
Thank you.
If I could speak to it, Madam Mayor, the actual setting up of the Australia Day Awards Committee, you look at the attachment on that and it shows what council delegated to that committee. It did not delegate setting a date, and this committee has set a date. So if you want to look at the delegations in that motion we moved, we delegated to them to do all these things, and they have done a fantastic job, including the Mayor as the chair of it. And that's why I've put in there that the letter be sent by the Deputy Mayor, because I don't think the Mayor should thank herself. So that's why I've asked the Deputy Mayor to be signing the letter of thanks on behalf of Council to those people. That's just confirming the date that's in that report, but it wasn't delegated to that committee. That's why I've moved that as such, Madam Mayor.
Can I have... thank you. Councillor Morris, when you moved it for debate, do you want to then move another amendment to take items 1 and 2, or you want the whole 3 in as well?
Madam Mayor, with the comments by Councillor Horval, if it isn't delegated authority, Council should be resolving what the date is. So yes, there is credit. There is merit in item 3 being there. If it's delegated to the committee, we don't need it. If it isn't delegated to the committee, we really should be resolving that date.
The delegation that was made to the committee was to plan, conduct and review Kempsey Shire Council's annual Australia Day Awards event or events, to determine the award categories, eligibility criteria and assessment process, assess the nominations, determine the winners, commit or expend council's funds up to those budgeted in the conduct and review of the events, and to utilise other councils in the conduct of the event as agreed with the General Manager or their delegate. It would certainly be open to some to form the view that the planning and conducting the events would include the date on which those events were to be conducted.
It doesn't explicitly say that, though.
I would have to agree with that interpretation, but at the same time I believe there is merit in actually having it in the resolution, because it tells the community that it is on that date. Very few in the community will actually go through and read those minutes in detail and pick it up that it's on that date. So it aids in our advertising for the event and the fact that it is on Australia Day.
Advertising has started, has it?
The advertising for the awards nominations has started, but the advertising for the event hasn't till the last meeting we just had.
I don't speak against the amendment. Let's just leave it as is. Let's not micromanage our committees. Obviously, planning, the first thing you do in planning is you set a date. I think if we set a precedent that we send a letter from the Deputy Mayor to every committee that the Mayor is involved with, it just goes on and on. These people have done a great job. Councillors thank them, I'm sure. Let's move on.
Anyone, any further speakers? I put the recommendation. All in favour,
amendment,
the
Madam-
amendment, I put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment?
Could we actually see the amendment on the screen, please?
Yep.
I haven't actually seen that.
Would you like me to read it out again?
Send it through to the,
No, I haven't, I'm sorry. My amendment reads, in regard to the Australia Day Committee report submitted to this council meeting, council resolves that 1, it commends the report of the Australia Day Committee. 2, letters be sent by the Deputy Mayor to all committee members, thanking them for their diligence in the work they have done. That's not in my amendment. And number 3, the date for the 2020 Australia Day Awards and Australia Day Citizenship ceremonies be held on the actual day, 26th of January.
does any other councillor wish to speak? I put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment? All against the amendment? The amendment's been lost. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against the recommendation? The recommendation has been carried. Nine point two. You're right. 9.1, there is a recommendation. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'll move with a small change.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder?
I would like to see,
I
I
just-
move, yeah, the small change is that rather, take out the word simultaneously in 2B, and that conduct an expression of interest for interested parties to lease the Kempsey Shire after the preparation of the business plan. Pardon?
Can you speak to that?
I just need a seconder. Do I
Need
have a seconder?
before I can discuss it?
I'll second it, Madam Mayor. No one else.
Question?
Yes, I'll take a question first.
Through you, Madam Mayor, how long do we anticipate the business plan would take to complete?
Yep. Through you, Madam Mayor. I think as per the timetable that we were sort of included as part of the councillor briefing a few weeks ago, the business plan would take a couple of months to pull together. Obviously conscious that we've got Christmas and January coming up as well. And that's why the intention was that we would do both processes simultaneously, so that we can get to a point where we've got both pieces of information to be able to enable that compare and contrast, if you like, and bring back a further report for council consideration.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I'd argue that's not a small change. It's likely to be an amendment.
You would argue that it's not a small change, and you
I don't think
and you
it's a small
believe that it
change.
should be a foreshadowed motion?
Madam Mayor, have you made a decision on that, or are you going to hear from Councillor Morrison why he's put it in?
He's moved it. He's moved actually the whole motion, so it would need to be.
It's a motion, so I
It's-
need an amendment to change it.
That's correct.
I'll move an amendment. We stick with the original motion.
So we have a mover of the.
Madam
The
Mayor,
motion that we
point of
had-
order. Isn't that out of order? The councillor hasn't actually spoken to his motion as yet, so there shouldn't be no amendment to something before
Yeah,
he's
you can move an
spoken.
amendment at any time and highlight it, which we have done. We have the motion in front of us, which Councillor Morris has put the original motion, which with a small change, he believes, which we have captured. This is the original motion. We have a seconder to that motion, which is Councillor Horval.
And so
Now
he
we
should
have
be speaking.
amendment.
But he should speak before the amendment's moved.
He's allowed to speak. Councillor, and you're speaking out of turn. I will call the speakers when I am ready to call a speaker. Thank you. So we have the original motion, which has been moved and seconded. We have an amendment. Councillor Morris, you may speak to the original motion.
Madam Mayor, the reason why I've made that small change is we've been at this for 2.5 years Let's not rush it at the end and potentially get it wrong. And by doing it now, we'll be having people put in an expression of interest, which we don't know what the conditions of that expression of interest will be. And that will be determined by, and that may influence what sort of expression of interest we receive. The business plan will also lay out what improvements we intend to make, which will change the operation, potentially change the operation of the SALEYARDS and vary the expression of interest. I suppose, to put it in an analogy which may be more easily understood by some people, if you had a house and you were about to lease it for 5 years or 10 years, would you go out and get an expression of interest and agree to that lease and then 2 years later upgrade it but still have to honour that lease? Or would you let the person that is expressing an interest in it know what is likely to occur into the long run? The value that we can get from an expression of interest may be considerably greater if there is a business plan with a path for upgrades and we know where that money is going to come from. It's mentioned in the body of the report that council would, is likely to still retain responsibility for the upgrades. So we're asking somebody to give us an estimate of what they think it's worth for them to lease for potentially 20 years, because that's what was discussed at an earlier meeting, to make it worthwhile for them. But they don't know what the condition of the SALEYARDS is going to be into the future. That could drastically change the amount of money that council gets if we go down the path of leasing. I think it would be prudent. 2 months is not a long time when we've been 2.5 years getting to this point. Let's get a realistic expression of interest from the community operators rather than one with a lot of unknowns in what they'll be doing an expression of interest on.
Jules, you have an amendment.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll speak to that.
I need a seconder for your amendment.
Could I ask?
Could we hear what her original amendment is, please, Madam?
It's as is.
As was originally.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes, councillor.
Question of acting GM. Can you give me a comment on Councillor Morris's motion, please?
We probably should hear from the amendment first.
Councillor, you're talking out of turn. I will take the question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that can be accommodated, I guess, in terms of us pulling this paper together, conscious of, as you referred to, Councillor Morris, that consideration of this issue had commenced a long time ago, and prior to myself and the manager responsible commencing with council. We can accommodate that. It will just add some time into that schedule. And I guess the original plan was to sort of try and get this back to council as quickly as possible. Some of those items were going to be accommodated for and would be allowed for in terms of any potential agreements anyway, in terms of dealing with future upgrades. But in terms of the time to allow for that, that wouldn't be a major issue.
Thank you for answering the question. Now, do I have a seconder?
Motion, Madam Mayor, to hear us speak.
Thank you. So we do have a seconder. Councillor Shields.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. We've been talking about SALEYARDS for 7 years now, since I've been on council anyway, and we're still at this position. We know that the SALEYARDS are not running as effectively as what they possibly could. We know that there is a lot of money that's being spent on the SALEYARDS that is, again, it's probably not the most effective use of that funding. So this motion has actually come about because we need to actually find some solutions for the SALEYARDS, and the current operators will actually, or the current lessees per day will actually tell you that things could be done a lot better. And so we're in the process now of seeing that through to fruition. So again, if we're waiting for the business plan to come out, and as you can see from the report, there are umpteen plans that have been done for the SALEYARDS already, and yet we're still talking about the SALEYARDS and not doing anything. The business plan might take 2 months, so we're in October now. I think it would be unlikely for it to come to the December meeting, and then we have Christmas, and then we have January off, and then we're probably looking at February, if we're being realistic, of when it's going to come back. All we're talking about with the lease is an expression of interest. So it's not tying us down to agreeing. There are no specifics. It's just saying, is there anyone out there that's interested in leasing the Saleyards? And so that might actually help inform us with the business plan. I don't see a problem with doing the two simultaneously, and I think that the longer we wait, honestly, this term is going to be over in a flash, and then yet again we'll have done nothing about the Saleyards. I finally think that we're at the point where we're in a position to actually do something about the Saleyards moving forward. I don't think that it's going to affect the business plan in any way by calling for expressions of interest. I think we need to keep moving with this instead of delaying as we have for 7 years.
Speaker Horwell. And then I'll take Councillor Patterson. You're
Madam-
speaking against the amendment, I take it?
No, Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask some questions if possible, if that's okay by you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. I guess I'll be asking questions of the Acting General Manager, and it's to do with the finances and also the animal welfare. I spoke quickly with you last night, but I'd like the public to know what the answers are. Back in, I think, 2017, the council moved a motion asking that the welfare of animals be considered. It was then pushed and not reported back to council, and then it was amalgamated into the business case that is coming forward. And we have not had a welfare.
Councillor
animal
Horwell,
welfare.
I just ask you that this motion is not about animal welfare. This motion is around the strategic options. So
Yes, and-
can you get to your question that is on the motion?
Yes, but in the business paper, it's talking about animal welfare, Madam Mayor, so I'm wanting to ask about the finances in relation to animal welfare, and I draw my fellow councillors' attention to the fact of what happened on the 7:30 report last week with the inquiry or report on horse racing and the dreadful dealing with animals there, the greyhound situation. that went on
Councillor, I
before.
remind you again.
My question is to do with the fact that there should be alarm bells going with council, and I'm asking the Acting General Manager, in 1 year, the disposal of dead animals from our Saleyards in 2016-17,
Councillor, point of order. This motion is around the Saleyard Strategic Management Options Report, preliminary outcomes. Your question is,
I'm about to ask it, Madam Mayor.
is it about the Strategic Management Options Report?
Yes, and the cost of animal welfare is about the upgrading, and if we're going to upgrade, we've got to make sure that the welfare of the animals there is a part of it. So we've got $3,771 being spent in 2016-17 on disposal of animals. Then out of the council budget, general fund, in the 2017-18 it went to $14,344, which is a threefold increase. Were alarm bells going off in council when the increase in disposal of animals? There would have had to been more animals dying in our Saleyards, and that should be concerning. So can you explain why there have been such a big increase, Mr. Gentleman, Acting General Manager?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just to respond to some of those questions. Firstly, the report does deal with animal welfare, and that's part of the consideration in terms of the business plan. It's one of a number of risks that we're actually more aware of, and making sure that we're addressing in terms of the future business model for the Saleyards going forward. And so, yes, it is an important consideration, but there are a whole lot of considerations and other risks that we need to factor in as well. In relation to the increased cost in terms of disposal of dead animals, yes, that has gone up. We're aware of it. Actions are being taken from a council perspective to understand the reasons for that, to make sure that any cost impacts on council are mitigated and those costs are recovered as appropriate. We are talking about $14,000. It's not a small amount, but it's not something that's massively significant either. That said, we are obviously dealing with that issue and actioning it, and so those processes are actually in place and being dealt with.
Okay, so there's nothing you know of in the council Saleyards that are causing the extra deaths of animals?
No, because as far as I'm aware, I don't believe that any of those issues are necessarily. There was one one beast that we do know that was a result of at the sale yards. There are other factors that will contribute to that in terms of whether a beast are fit for load, and in terms of their condition when they arrive. So it's not just a simple answer, and that's why council staff are actually looking at that in terms of understanding the issue and making sure that those issues are being managed.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. You're managing it. The next question I have is the fact that the cost to council is going up, and that's in the business paper. Why is there such a huge increase in the cost of council running the sale yards in the last financial year? Can you put that down to any factors?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. We made reference in this paper that's in front of council today that obviously the financial sustainability of the sale yards is an important consideration issue for us to manage. The detailed paper that went before council at the June council meeting had significant amount of explanation around that, Councillor Horville, in terms of some of the factors that are driving the increased costs. As articulated in this paper, and as we've covered off in several of the council briefings, there's a significant increase obviously around legislative requirements, risk, and our need to make sure that we're appropriately managing those risks as well. And so all of those items come with a cost attached to them. That's why it's important that the business plan considers the future operation of the sale yards, not just from a potential capital perspective, but also if council was to be the owner and operating of the sale yards, what costs would that be on council to actually operate those and making sure that we're in compliance with all of those legislative requirements. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of detail that was provided in the previous report in terms of those the financial year-on-year change in the costs. And that's obviously a major consideration as we take this forward to come to a decision between own and operate or a potential lease scenario.
Yeah, to say the cost of the maintenance of the sale yards in 1 year have almost doubled according to these figures in many things. So I must wonder, are we using our own staff for that, or did we
Councillor,
have outside
I
contractors?
need to bring you back to the motion. This is not a critique on the operation of the sale yards. The motion and the recommendation is around the sale yard strategic management options and what options we have of putting that back out to where we're going to go in the future. So will you please keep your questions to the recommendation?
Madam Mayor, thank you for that. I'm talking about the cost of maintaining, and that's one of the options in what's being suggested, maintain and upgrade. If our costs are going up, then the option of
So you want to take that option away from the options? Is that what you're trying to get at with your
I can vote against
questioning?
the whole thing and say we should sell it, Madam Mayor, because it's such a huge cost. So I'm asking about the cost going forward.
So what you're trying to get at is to change the recommendation, move an amendment to leave the sell option in. Is that where you're coming from?
That's a possibility, Madam Mayor. That's why I'm asking the questions, if I may.
Thank you.
So the other, going to sleep, iPad doesn't help. You're talking about an expression of interest process, Mr. Acting General Manager. That's going to be a cost, I presume, because you have to draw up a business plan first before you put the expression of interest out, or you put an expression of interest out first. What is the cost of an expression of interest process to council?
Through you, Madam Mayor, all of that cost would be basically in staff time. So we would envisage that we would be delivering that with existing resources, and any costs would be outside of those actual, just the utilisation of our existing resources, I would believe would be minimal. There may be some small legal costs that may need to be incurred, but once again, we've got some information already in terms of we've already sort of started some of the work on that, so I wouldn't envisage that would be significant either.
So those costs won't be added to the cost of running the sale yards?
Any cost that is incurred as part of the process of the running an expression of interest process in relation to the sale yards would go against the sale yards budget in this financial year. But as I said, I don't envisage that they would be significant. The majority of that work would be done utilising existing staff resources.
Is there a ballpark figure? I know asking a financial expert a ballpark figure.
Ballpark figure for what? For the staff time?
Yes, and for the cost to the SALEYARDS budget.
No, I don't actually have that at this stage. I haven't tried to estimate the amount of staff time. The real cost for that is that it wouldn't be an incremental cost in terms of council's budget. It'd just be an opportunity cost in terms of those people not being able to do work on other projects. But otherwise, it would be largely time that would come from either myself or the manager of commercial business, largely. And so, unfortunately, we don't get paid overtime, so it's not going to be any extra overtime cost that would be incurred with that. So there wouldn't be any net increase, at least from a staff perspective, in terms of council's budget.
Okay, and finally, as I said, the question about animal welfare again, Mr. Acting General Manager. Have we had a report done by any professionals who know about this into the animal welfare at our SALEYARDS in the last 2 years?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no.
Councillor Morris, are you moving an amendment to the amendment?
I'll consider that at the moment, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Morris.
I would like to move what should initially be a foreshadowed amendment, but then when I move it as a foreshadowed amendment as the mover of the original motion, if I accept that, which would be unusual if I didn't, it becomes part of the original motion, doesn't it? So my foreshadowed amendment, which I will accept, is that we conduct an expression of interest for interested parties to lease the Kempsey SALEYARDS after the preparation of a draft business plan. I don't believe it needs to come back to council to accept and adopt, but I believe we at least need to give the industry the benefit of having an indication as to what council's plan is or business plan is for the SALEYARDS. That will still cause some delay, but it will provide the industry with a better basis to prepare an expression of interest for the SALEYARDS, and it will not complicate us with having to come back potentially to a February council meeting. It may mean that you won't be able to put it out until early January as an expression of interest, but that will compress the time somewhat, and I believe will provide us with a far better expression of interest and potentially give council a better financial outcome as a result of that.
So you've outlined your foreshadowed amendment.
And I accept that as part of the original motion.
Of the original motion. So the original motion has obviously been changed. Councillor Shields, I'll take Councillor Shields.
I have to leave in about 2 minutes or less.
Yes.
As my final point before I leave, I'd just like to say that we have 3 options. So we have maintain, upgrade and lease. We obviously want to narrow those options down and work out where we're moving forward with the SALEYARDS. It's going to be very hard to work out if the lease option is to stay or not if we don't actually go for expressions of interest to find out does anyone actually want to lease it. So, in the interest of keeping things moving, I don't see it a problem, as the council staff have preferred in the actual motion to keep the process happening simultaneously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support Councillor Shields. We've done the community engagement. The community has come back to us, like I believe, that we should maintain ownership as a preferred option, but that council endorse, this is what the motion recommendation says, that the council endorse the further investigation analysis to maintain, upgrade and lease options to determine the most advantageous option will include maintain and upgrade or simultaneously conduct an expression of interest. They're doing what we've asked them to do. We as councillors now have got the feedback. I believe we should move forward, as Councillor Shields says, and we should put this out for expression of interest, because how can we build a business plan if we know that no one's interested to move forward with us? No matter how long or if the business plan only takes a month, 2 months to prepare, but what's the use of having a business plan if you have no expressions of interest? So we should move forward with the existing notice of motion.
I'll take Councillor Shields needs to leave. Thank you.
Will that change anything? Because
I don't believe so.
She
She's just not here for the vote.
Can't speak in second time.
Can't, we've had a speaker for, we've had a speaker against.
I'd like to speak against it, Madam Mayor.
I haven't spoken yet.
Can we put it?
2 and 2.
No, Councillor Horval. He'll take his 5 minutes, so Councillor Shields can't be in the room to vote. That's the tactic, I would imagine.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. How can you predict I'll speak for 5 minutes? I find that offensive.
Just take your...
I find it offensive,
I'll
Madam Mayor.
I accept that and I apologise. Will you please speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to make the statement that the idea that we have a lease option is incredibly strange to me in looking at the return from the submissions. We had over 1,000 submissions and 8 were in favour of leasing, 13 were in favour of selling, and yet we're looking at leasing. Do we represent the community or do we not? As far as I'm concerned, we should not be considering leasing, but the majority of you seem to be talking in favour of finding that out. But as far as I'm concerned, we go with the majority of people who said that we should maintain or upgrade. And the other issue I have with the idea of upgrade and this process is we are talking about looking at getting money from grants and finding, probably having to do dollar for dollar. But what amount of money would we need to upgrade and how much would we get in grants? These are unanswered questions and therefore I will be speaking, that's why I'm speaking against the amendment. We shouldn't be considering this until we know where we can go with upgrading it.
So I've had two speakers against now. You still want to go with put the motion? Do I have, does everyone agree the motion be put?
I have right of reply, don't I?
If
As
the
you moved with
motion's
the
been
original
put,
motion?
the amendment's been put. I don't believe so. Still have the right of reply.
We need to vote on motion being put, don't we?
If someone seconds it. Oh, no, you don't have to second a motion being put.
No.
I don't believe.
No.
You don't. No.
Voting on the motion being put.
All in favour of the motion being put, the amendment being put. All against the amendment being put. We don't put the amendment. See you later, Councillor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. The reason I didn't vote for that is because I had a question and I was going to abstain from voting the whole time because I didn't get to ask the question. Now, we've had dates thrown around about business cases and expressions of interests and whatever else. Exactly how long do we predict that the business cases are going to be before they're back to council? And how long would an expression of interest take?
Through you, Madam Mayor, as I indicated before, I would have thought that the business plan would be something that would take sort of like 2 to 3 months in terms of pulling that together. As I indicated earlier as well, obviously with staff leave over Christmas and the January period potentially may have some impact on that. But that would be the time frame that we would be sort of looking to have that completed. The other thing in relation to the expression of interest, that process, because it is literally trying to determine what interest there is in relation to someone leasing and operating the sale yards, there would be some time frame involved, obviously preparing those expression of interest documents to sort of go out to market with. But I would have thought that would be something to be out for say 4 weeks, so it'd probably be a similar time frame. Which was, I guess, why initially the original report was that we would sort of go out and do both simultaneously. The expression of interest is literally just to determine if there is any interest. It doesn't necessarily mean that immediately you would sign a lease agreement on the back of that. We would need to, obviously there's a lot of work that would be involved in that, and that's why I guess initially we were aiming to run both processes concurrently, because they would be, give or take a similar length of time.
So you're just asking that they express interest in leasing the facility and then there'll be a tender
But-
process.
Well, then there have to be a subsequent process then in terms of, and obviously in terms of, you know, what the actual contractual arrangements would look like, etc. So a lot of that would form part of the original expression of interest.
Okay.
You know, but there would obviously be, you know, further negotiations, etc. that would need to happen after that, and it could be a two-stage process.
Sure, thanks.
Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, at the present time, we extended the lease for the present lessor for 6 months, I believe, staff informed us. If it takes longer to get this correct, we take the time. We don't rush this because there's something that's significant to the farmers of the MACLEAY and for the business of the MACLEAY. Now, of course, we have recommendations to lease, we have comments about other options. So I'd rather see a proper business plan put in place and adopted. Otherwise, it could be again amended quite further. If you have a business plan in place and it's been adopted, it gives certainty to any leasee or others where we're going with this sale yards. So if it does take a few more months, I can't see the harm in that. At the present time, it's business as usual. So let's get this correct. Let's not rush the situation. Let's get it right before we do anything about the sale yards. The farmers who have angst, let's not make it harder by being more confusing to them and to others. Let's take our time. If we need to wait until it's done, let's do so.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just noting in point 3 of the recommendation that council provide a report back to a future council meeting to recommend either maintain, upgrade or lease as preferred management option for the Kempsey Saleyards. We need the information of expressions of interest to maintain, upgrade or lease. If we maintain, which I prefer, upgrade, which I prefer, and lease, which I prefer, we need the information of who is going to give an expression of interest to create a business plan. We need that for the business plan. As a business person, I need to know what where options are when we're going into business, when we're going into an agreement. We need to make a relationship with these people that are showing expressions of interest. As we've spoken for before, that the sale yards may actually be a loss for quite a while yet until we can upgrade the facility to its required level. So the recommendation as it stands answers all the questions that everyone here is asking. The people that we've put in charge, the managers that we've put in charge and the directors to look after the sale yards and investigate the option have come back to us with this, that council actively investigate grant funding opportunities as
Point of
well.
order, Madam Mayor.
So,
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes, point of order.
Is it correct that Councillor Patterson is speaking in favour of the amendment and he has already spoken on that?
I believe he has spoken on it.
Oh, I thought he was leading to a question, Madam Mayor, so that's why
Yeah.
I didn't jump in earlier.
Your question, councillor?
well, my question is why do we need to question what council has given us as a recommendation? We have asked them to do this for us. This recommendation is what we need to move forward with. Expressions of interest that also note a
Point of order, Madam Mayor, that's not a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Yeah. Councillor Saul, Councillor Morris. Just before we start, I have a question.
I have a question too, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Well, you can take your question first. Take your question first.
Okay. Yes, Mr Acting General Manager, on page 15, I think it is. Yes, there's a diagram of how we are moving forward with this if we support the motion today. And it's got review, maintain, upgrade, and then it's got two boxes, develop business plan and undertake an expression of interest. Both those are happening simultaneously. Then undertake a comparative analysis. And then off to the right, we've got investigate grants for the upgrade of the sale yard if appropriate and affordable. Wouldn't that happen in the second tier of actions to find out, to inform the business plan? Wouldn't it be more appropriate to be investigating the grants at an earlier stage than to where it is on that chart?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in reality that would just be happening at all times, depending on what grants are released and that sale yards potentially would qualify for. So, I mean, where it's positioned on the box may have been misleading, but wasn't the actual intention. That would be something that we would always be scanning for in terms of the grant funding that's available, and whether the sale yards would fit with that, and whether the timing, etc., and affordability would work as well.
So is there any grants that we're looking at the moment, if you're saying we're doing it ongoing, which is, as I expect, an appropriate thing for council to do, is there any grants on the horizon that we could be applying for?
At this stage, through you, Madam Mayor, there's none that we're actually applying for currently, but we continually are made aware of grant funding as it's announced, and then we will consider it at that time.
Thank you, that clarifies it. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
Is yours a question, or you just got your right?
It was a question, and then I was intending to sum up.
Yeah, okay.
So if you've got a question, you should go first, Madam Mayor.
Well, it is in a sense that I just need to get this clarified. If we put out an expression of interest, which is not a lease, or it's just an expression of interest for a lease, and nothing comes back because we haven't tested the market, that would immediately take out that option, maintain, upgrade or lease, probably, possibly.
Take out the
yes,
lease
no?
component.
So would you want to speak to that when that came back, when your report comes back? My understanding in point 3 would be that we would have the option of maintain, upgrade. If it came back with no,
Yep,
because we haven't tested the market, we don't know if there's any people out there.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we have had some informal interest that's been expressed, but only in a very informal sense. The process as it's outlined and that chart that Councillor Horville referred to is so that we can actually do both those pieces of work. Through the expression of interest process, we'll actually be able to understand is there any real true interest in terms of leasing of the sale yards, and that would enable us, when we come back to a future council meeting with the report, we'll have actually progressed the business plan, which obviously will give us a better understanding of what's required from a financial sustainability perspective for the sale yards. We'll be able to come back and actually provide a report to council that compares in a more detailed sense what's required to own and operate the sale yards, and then also report back in terms of what interest is out there potentially from a lease perspective, and come back with a report to council for council's consideration in relation to that. The lease option will then also, as part of both of those, both the lease and the maintain and upgrade options will obviously have a greater consideration then around some of those risk areas that have been articulated in the report, particularly around biodiversity, chain of responsibility, animal welfare, workplace health and safety. Those other items are critically important, and it's why we need to come back with a more complete report for council now that we've narrowed down the options to just these three. We have heard the message from the community in relation to their desire to have the sale yards retained as a council asset. However, the reason that the lease is still on there is that on the basis of there is a whole lot of risk around that, and there's also financial sustainability, and the fact that we can actually have the business plan piece of work and the expression of interest process to occur means that we're going to be in a much better position to provide information to council to make a better considered decision as to what it wants to do with that asset going forward.
So, in your view, having the expression of interest out simultaneously to doing the business case is of an advantage to the end result?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the main advantage of doing them simultaneously is from a time perspective, whether they were done simultaneously or whether a business plan was completed and then the expression of interest was to follow at the completion of that process, the main impact of that essentially is just additional time into the process. That was, I guess, the consideration when we thought we could do both of those concurrently and get something back to council early in 2020 to then start to implement the decision. So it's essentially a time consideration, but that's up for council.
So in your view, the motion that is being suggested now by Councillor Morris wouldn't have any material difference to the result except for time.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I think largely it would just extend the process by those couple of months, which is not necessarily a significant amount of time. There may be some information as we progress the business plan around understanding a little bit better what some of those future capital requirements will be. As Councillor Horville alluded to, there's been a number of reports in the past. They are now out of date, and we need to really sort of test those in terms of what's actually required. So there is the chance, obviously, that there'll be some additional information that may help inform the expression of interest process that may come out of the development of that business plan.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
I suppose I've got some questions along similar lines, but with a slightly different tack. It's now been changed such that it's a draft business plan when we go out to the expression of interest. So they still will dovetail in to some extent, just the expression of interest can't be put out quite so early. And I don't fully understand what you are wanting from the expression of interest, but from the discussion that we've had, I'm gleaning that you want an expression of interest to indicate that somebody is interested in leasing the SALEYARDS, probably an idea of the quantum of payment that would be received, but not definite. That would need to be finalised, and you would probably come up with a short list of preferred tenderers if we ultimately go down that path. Is that correct? You also alluded to the fact that it would take about 4 weeks to prepare the expression of interest documents, and it would take a couple of months to do the business plan. And unless I can't see that report in 3 coming back to council at the December meeting, would that be a reasonable or an unreasonable expectation for it to come back to the December council meeting?
Sorry, which report?
The report on recommending that we either maintain, upgrade or lease as a preferred management.
Yep, so through you, Madam Mayor, the briefing that we did a couple of weeks ago, we indicated that report wouldn't come back until
early February.
February or March. I can't remember the exact
March.
date, but it would be, yes.
Yeah.
The December is way too soon. It definitely won't come back to the December council meeting.
So what I'm suggesting, or what I'm sort of working out in my own head, is if we prepare a draft business plan, that provides greater detail and certainty to people putting in expressions of interest. It may broaden the potential group of people or businesses that are interested in leasing because they've got more certainty as what is going forward. If that draft business plan is prepared by the end of December, we can call expressions of interest by the end of January and still potentially have the report back by February, maybe, but most probably March. So the delay that it's going to introduce is between, I'd say a maximum of 4 weeks, if any. And it's going to provide greater certainty. Would you agree with that as a timeline?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd need to give the timeline a bit greater thought in terms of what other workload is sitting with, particularly the area that would be responsible for delivering
But the time frame you're talking about, you're going to be coming back with a business plan, which I would assume that council will be adopting.
So the business plan won't be done before December.
Before we come back with the choices to the preferred management option, or would be
absolutely, it'd be done before. That was part of the process, is that we would do the business plan and do the expression of interest. In terms of, though, if I heard you right, and maybe I didn't, was that the indication was that the business plan would be done by December, and then the expression of interest following that. Given that we are at the end of October.
But I'm saying the draft business plan goes out with the expression of interest. It doesn't have to come back to council for adoption.
No, that's right, and that wasn't the intention that we would bring it back to council. But still, the draft business plan I don't think we would have done until early in the new year.
But would you suggest that it may provide greater interest for the expression of interest process if there was some more certainty around and we may
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
attract a greater field, which
Yeah.
could produce a better outcome for council?
That is a possibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, as I said, we know that there's been a small level of informal interest, but as to whether
If we can broaden that,
as
that's
to whether that can
council.
be broadened or not, I
Yeah.
can't answer that.
I suppose I should sum up, Madam Mayor, because it's almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we have.
To be perfectly honest, I'm against the lease option. I prefer the maintain at the upgrade. But what I'm arguing is intuitively counter to what I want to see council achieve the best outcome. Now, the best outcome for the lease is to attract the broadest possible audience to put in an expression of interest. And we are more likely to do that if we've at least got a draft business plan to present to them as to how we see it operating. So I suppose I'm arguing in a way against what my preferred option would be, which is either maintain or upgrade. The other thing, if you look at the figures, there were some in fact it says 967 and 994, but it's actually 968 and 996 that were for maintain and upgrade, respectively. But if you discount the form letters, that were 944 of them, which I'm not suggesting we should, but if you happen to do that, the single option submissions, there's 6 to 7 times for upgrade than what there are to lease. And there's 3 times to maintain as what there are to lease. So therefore there's a much stronger desire in the community to maintain or upgrade. And I appreciate the reasons why council is saying let's investigate the lease, because there are considerable other risk factors associated with it. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate that to the extent that I believe we need to be getting the widest possible audience or businesses for the expression of interest. And I believe a delay of 1, maximum 2 months to achieve the opportunity to get the best outcome is not unreasonable, and we've been doing this for 2.5 years in the current process. And as Councillor Shields said, 7 years. In fact, it's probably, I can remember it was being discussed when I was a staff member. So we're not talking 7 years, we're talking about 12 to 15 years, and it's about that long since we've had any major upgrades up there, and we are overdue for some upgrades. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that it has to be not run concurrently, but what I'm saying is we at least need a draft business plan to provide more certainty and potentially a broader audience to put in an expression of interest. Thank you.
Okay, we have the amendment. So I'm going to put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment? All against the amendment? The amendment has been lost. We now go back to the motion that has been foreshadowed and incorporated into the original motion, correct? Thank you. No need to speak. All in favour of the motion? All against the motion? The motion has been carried. Thank you, councillors. Well, we have our citizenship. Yes, I know, and then we'll do the citizenship, but that means that everyone has to move, including...
Madam Mayor, I move a procedural motion that we delay the confidential item 11.3 until after morning tea.
I agree. Well, I agree. I've got a seconder. All in favour of doing that? All against? Because we do have a very important ceremony that we do need to do now, and welcome our candidates for citizenship into our community, and we welcome them into chambers. So I'm going to now suspend standing orders while we do the ceremony. Oh. Okay, alrighty. So if the candidates that are here, that are going to take the pledge this morning, would like to move to some in the front, to the front seats, that would be fantastic. We do have 8 candidates this morning, and we're just waiting on 2 to come and arrive. and probably car parking might have been a bit of a problem this morning around Chambers. We have parking at a premium on council days. I think we do have 8 candidates here now. Excellent. And their families. So good morning, everyone. And it's my pleasure to welcome the citizenship candidates who will soon join us in becoming Kempsey's newest Australian citizens. As is tradition, and it's now, we need to include an acknowledgement of country. We've already done one this morning, but this is a special one to be included in this ceremony. So on behalf of us all, I acknowledge the Dunghutti people, the original inhabitants of this ancient land, and pay our respects to the Aboriginal people of Australia. Firstly, I have a special message to read to our candidates from the Honourable David Coleman MP, Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs. And this will be followed by the Citizenship Preamble. Today you are become an Australian citizen. We are immensely proud of what we have achieved as a nation, and we welcome you in joining us. Our history and culture has been forged over thousands of years, first through Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and more recently from people from all corners of the earth. Australia has succeeded as a nation by embracing and defending our national values. We believe in freedom, in the rule of law, in democracy. We believe that all people are equal, regardless of their cultural background, gender, race, or religion. We are a resilient nation. We have overcome world wars, depression, drought, and flood. We stand with other strong democracies in helping to defend and protect hard-fought freedoms. By committing yourself to Australia today, you have chosen to embrace our nation and its values, like so many millions of people throughout our history. You have decided to take on the rights and responsibilities of Australian citizenship. On behalf of the Australian Government, I congratulate you on reaching this very special day. It is now your responsibility to join all of us in building an even stronger nation. And they are the words of our Minister, the Honourable David Coleman, MP. And as Mayor, it is also my pleasure to say congratulations and welcome you as citizens of Australia, and on behalf of the Kempsey Shire community. The Australian Citizen Preamble states, Australian citizenship represents full and formal membership of the community of the Commonwealth of Australia. And Australian citizenship is a common bond involving reciprocal rights and obligations uniting all Australians while respecting their diversity. Persons on whom Australian citizenship is conferred enjoy these rights and undertake to accept these obligations. By pledging loyalty to Australia and its people, and by sharing their democratic beliefs, and by respecting their rights and liberties, and by upholding and obeying the laws of Australia. Would the citizen candidates taking pledge 1, under God, please stand. Daniel. Okay, that's all right. We have Mr. Bruce Atkinson from New Zealand, Mr. Bijou, Francis, India, Mr. James Fraser, United Kingdom, Mrs. Marion Fraser, United Kingdom, Mr. Godio Lewis Gabagnuel, yes, from New Zealand, Mr. Jason okay, thank you, Korplager from New Zealand, and Mrs. Neetu Joseph from India. So if you wish to make your pledge on a holy book, please hold in your hands. The words of the pledge are set out on your pledge card. In order to become an Australian citizen, please loud and clear Repeat the pledge after me. From this time forward under God, I pledge my loyalty to Australia and its people, whose democratic beliefs I share, whose rights and liberties I respect, and whose laws I will uphold and obey. And we have one candidate, citizen, making pledge number 2. Sorry? Two. Oh, one's changed. Okay, my sheet here is not correct. So if the citizens that have just taken the pledge would like to sit and the new citizens would like to stand up, we have Miss Caroline Parker, and we have someone that I read out before, I believe. Is that right? That's correct. Thank you, Jason. The words of the pledge are set out on your pledge card, and in order to become an Australian citizen, please loud and clear repeat the pledge after me. From this time forward, I pledge my loyalty to Australia and its people, whose democratic beliefs I share, whose rights and liberties I respect, and whose laws I will uphold and obey. So as your name is called, could each of you please come forward and receive your Australian citizenship and the gift from the community of Kempsey. And if you'd just like to stay and move towards the flags, we'll take a group photo when everyone has received their certificates.
Mr. Bruce Atkinson.
Thank you.
Mr. Totem Caravaggio. Mr. James Fraser. Ms. Marion Fraser. Mr. Guido Louis Gouverneur. Mr. Jason Kloproga. Ms. Neethu Joseph. Ms. Caroline Parker.
We just have one photo over here, and then we really finished.
You can get in nice and close.
A little bit forward, for an angle, that'd be great, thank you.
We welcome you as citizens of Australia. Congratulations on your decision to become Australian citizens. Choosing to become a citizen is a very significant expression of your pride in being part of Australia. It's a symbol of your commitment to Australia and its values. You now hold formal membership into the Australian community and the right to call yourself an Australian, or I'm sure at times an Aussie. We know that no celebration is complete without an applause for our new citizens, without us all acknowledging and welcoming you. So welcome to our new citizens, Bruce, Bijou, James, Marion, Gideon, Lewis, Jason, Nitu and Caroline. Welcome. It is also our tradition at this ceremony for citizens who are already Australians and give them the opportunity to recommit to Australian values and to take the affirmation. So if all the citizens here that are Australian, and even those that ones that maybe one day will become Australian citizens, if they would just like to stand, and we'll have a reaffirmation. I think yes? We do have the words somewhere, but I'll say them so that you can repeat after me. As an Australian citizen, I affirm my loyalty to Australia and its people, whose democratic beliefs I share, whose rights and liberties I respect, and whose laws I uphold and obey. Now, we can't have a ceremony without the national anthem. That completes the ceremony. Then we will ask that you join us all for morning tea and to mingle and to talk to our new Australian citizens. So if everyone could be upstanding for the national anthem. It's now official. You're very much Australian citizens. Welcome again. Join us for morning tea. And if you would like family photos, I'm sure we can accommodate that. You just need to come around here somewhere and we can have some more photos. Thank you. To resume the council meeting, and we're going to go into confidential, so we need to clear the gallery. We just need a very short time to deal with one confidential matter, and then anyone that would like to come back in may come back in. That's fine. Oh, well, I don't. Councillor Saul has returned to chambers. Do I have a councillor move us into Thank you, councillor. It's been moved by councillor Williams. Councillor Morris, seconded by councillor Saul. Are we all agreed to move into confidential? That's carried. We need our camera Councillor.
Madison has indicated that he is on quorum, no need to leave at any stage.
Yes.
To prevent the circumstance of us not having a quorum to consider the outdoor dining matter,
Yes.
bring that forward to deal with that.
I don't need to put that, do we? A procedural motion? Do we need a second? Yeah. It's been seconded by Councillor Horval. All in favour of that procedural motion? That's been carried. So we will bring. Thank you, Councillor Saul.
Well, Madam Mayor, I'll now leave the chambers and the result for 9.7.
Thank you. So we now have a motion for outdoor dining, which is 9.7. Thank you, Councillor Morris. Been seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any debate? I put the recommendation. All in favour? It's page 4, I think.
Madam Mayor, I just had a couple of questions.
Yes, certainly.
I've moved it, and it's not changed, but the reason why I withdrew it was because Councillor Saul had to be withdrawn because Councillor Saul had a conflict of interest. That's the reason why I withdrew
Yes.
that one. But I also recall when we first introduced this moratorium on charges for outdoor dining, how it only included the Kempsey, or the area impacted by the bypass. And when we suggested that we should extend it across the Shire, there was concern raised about the dramatic impact that it would have on income. Here we are now extending it for another 5 years. There's still no sort of mention as to whether we intend to reintroduce them or method to reintroduce them after that 5 years, or is there no intention to reintroduce them? Charges for outdoor dining.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, this was put in place, the moratorium, through to 30 June 2025, and any extension would be considered at that, like prior to that period ending.
So prior to that time, are we going to develop or prior to that time, we're going to come back and decide whether we should develop a procedure to reintroduce fees, or are we just going to come up with a report similar to this in June 2025?
Well, yeah. I think that's for further consideration as we get
Because
closer.
it would be nice to make a decision as to whether we want to reintroduce it probably 12 months before, so that people have warning. So I'm sort of thinking of an amendment, and that is that council brings back a proposal to consider charging for outdoor dining to council, for council's consideration by the June council meeting 2024.
30 June 24.
Well, no, for council at the June meeting of 2024, because that flags then whether we want the staff to consider putting in a process to start charging again, or whether we're happy just to leave it as it is and roll it on for another 5 years at the June 2025. Because we'd need 12 months to gear it up and let people know. Does that be an acceptable amendment? I move that as amendment if I got a seconder.
Oh, you can just incorporate it if Councillor Patterson agrees.
Okay. That council receive a report to the June meeting, June 2024 meeting, to consider the reimposition of charges for outdoor dining. No, to consider, not to do it, because we would need that lead time to prepare the procedures, to advertise with the community.
The words aren't up on the screen. I'll put them on the...
But it's already done it till 2025. Yeah. And item 2 is simply, let's give 12 months notice, and if we're going to, the decision might be no, we're going to extend the moratorium. The decision might be yes, we need to start to introduce fees again. It should be 4 outdoor dining, not 2 outdoor dining, I think.
Yeah. Councillor Horval?
Madam Mayor, I have a question. I'm just wondering about the positivity of this idea of having outdoor dining. It lists there the number of outdoor dining venues across the Shire. Is there any method or process that council has in place to encourage other restaurants, eateries, whatever, to take up the offer? If they don't know about this, they might not do it, but if they know that there's this opportunity to put some chairs and tables outside their establishment, is there any way that council encourages that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, obviously there's the policy, the outdoor dining policy, but there's also the Easy to Do Business program. So small businesses would be able, or should be aware of that, and I think we have promoted that from council through its social media and other channels. And so small businesses should have some knowledge of that, and through that would then therefore be able to approach council in relation to. No, they don't even need to approach. Sorry, they go through the actual in terms of that with that new process. Yeah.
I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, all against. It's been carried. Thank you. Could someone please now bring back Councillor Saul? 9.2. It's on page 18. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. It's been withdrawn, and Councillor Horval has his light on, so he either has a question or wants to move an amendment.
A question, Madam Mayor.
Question?
Yes, in light of the August council meeting that there's been no decision to call us Kempsey Shire MACLEAY Valley Councils. I note that on page 19 that the recommendation from this committee on page 19, the first point in response, it says A, that the MACLEAY Valley Agribusiness Working Group be created. Should it be renamed Kempsey Shire, because we haven't yet renamed the Shire to MACLEAY Valley Council? That's the question, Madam Mayor. Should that be changed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Horval, as you're aware, both the Economic Development and Tourism Strategy and the Destination Management Plan are both branded MACLEAY Valley.
Yeah, I know.
And so that working group, which is effectively part of that strategy, would have a similar name.
Okay. I was just wondering whether it's being formed, it could be given the correct name, because we know that it's no longer...
Thank you, Councillor. That has been answered. Your next question?
Yes. Again, with reflection on what was said at the council meeting in August, in the concluding statement on page 22, it talks to map out a future plan for the development of the MACLEAY Valley that can guide our economic development and meet the needs of our community. Being technical, Kempsey and Crescent Head and Cundabung are not part of the MACLEAY Valley. I'm just wondering why we still have council staff referring to MACLEAY Valley when a decision is not yet made to change the name of the council. That's my question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, similar to my previous answer, the use of that term in this report aligns with the names of both the Economic Development and Tourism Strategy and the Destination Management Plan.
Thank you. Any further question?
Thank you, Madam.
Councillor Morris. No, who moved this? Councillor Patterson, do you wish to speak any further debate? I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, all against the recommendation. The recommendation has been carried. Thank you, councillors. So now we go on to 9.3. Thank you, councillor.
Second that. May lead to an amendment, and I think I know the answer to one of them at least, but I just want to... The local event really has little to no impact on businesses, does it? There's no obligation unless they're under an award to do that. I suppose when I read the report, I'm just wondering whether we could ask or whether we could notify these two organisations when they need to apply for the local event days in future, so we proactively seek their application rather than wait for their application, as we seem to have done in the past, because the last couple of years we haven't done it, and it's been because they haven't applied. And I'm just curious, are there any other events or potential events that we should be considering for local event day status into the future? I can't think of anything offhand, but I'm just wondering whether we should be, coming out of our tourism strategy, there might be something which we can do. I'm just sort of thinking from left field here. I'm trying to...
I guess if that happens, then we
Yeah,
would...
but I'm just saying we should be mindful of considering and looking at that. It also said that it's not mentioned in our DP or OP, and I'm just wondering whether we should be looking at embodying these sorts of things in our DP to encourage businesses to just for future. I'm not suggesting amendments needed, but I'm just suggesting that we look at covering that off in some of the initiatives within our DP, particularly for encouraging event activities, which aids in tourism.
Do you
That's
have
all.
a response about
Through you,
the
Madam
first
Mayor,
part of the question?
I guess just, and if I've missed anything, then
Yeah.
let me know. I think in relation to, happy to notify or provide some advice to both of these organisations in terms of when they can submit applications for us, and to do that more proactively. Can't think of any other days that would at this stage. But
It'd be nice if there was some in the future.
yeah, but if there are, then that's something that obviously we would need to consider and we would deal with at that point in time. The last question, sorry, was...
Oh, it was just whether we should include,
Oh,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah, sorry.
alluded to the fact that there's no mention in our DPROP.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering whether we should mention something along the lines of this, flowing from our tourism strategy or destination management strategy within our DP to
Yeah, that can definitely be,
support such applications.
yeah, as part of the next delivery program that gets developed for the next term of council, and that's something that we could consider incorporating as part of that.
Madam Mayor, could I make a comment on?
Yes, if you wish to speak to the...
Yeah, I'm for the motion, but I do want to speak up for business. That while it is good to have event days, public holidays, etc., they are an expense to the business, but it is a good idea to promote those things. And different businesses do have different policies on how the employees would take the day. Some people work up time in lieu and take the half day, or take a full day in time in lieu. Some people are just granted that. It is a very much driven by the economic times. I would hate to see us forced into saying that these days would be permanent. We have seen a different change in the economy over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been a councillor. So I just wanted to make that comment as we have seen the different applications details from 2014 to the current time. So we just need to be aware of business and costs, and as well as costs to council.
Thank you, councillor, and that is noted that we have gone from 2014 from the half-day public holidays, which were severely imposting business, to the event days, which can be managed by business through cost. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, all against the recommendation. Thank you, councillors. We now are on the next one that was withdrawn, was 9.6. 9. In my, I haven't got it withdrawn.
So 9.4 and 9.5 stayed as part of the consensus motion.
9.6, which is the proposed road, 9.7, oh, what, no? 9.6, the proposed road closure. Do I have a mover? Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Williams. I have a question. There must be some reason. Councillor Morris.
I withdrew it on the basis that I don't know what Steve Duval wanted to say. I found his email was somewhat confusing because it was a survey plan without any comments. I would like to hear what his comments were, so I'd like to move an amendment that we defer the matter until next month, to give the person that applied to speak at the public forum the opportunity to do so, which was prevented because of technical reasons.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I may ask Manager Thorogood just to give Councillor Morris an update. We had some information that was provided on this to the briefing last night, which I understand you're unable to make, which will clarify that, hopefully. So I've asked Manager Thorogood.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I spoke to Mr. Duval on the telephone on Monday regarding his difficulties in applying for the public forum. So unfortunately, by the time that he made contact with us to state that he'd had difficulties, it was past the closing date for the forum. And the forum date, the closure date in the code is a must. So there's not the option currently open to us to accept late applications to the forum. That's why I suggested that he share some information with councillors. The key thing that he wanted to be able to address was the feedback from, I think it was at DPI in there, stating that the proposal would create a loss of access to the riverbank, and hence why there was the amended survey plan that he provided in order to retain some of that access, and also the comments that were supported by council's staff that the access which is being lost is not actually practical access and is not used, and there are alternative accesses that people do use, and as such that this particular proposal won't result in any loss of amenity for anybody. So he wanted just councillors to be clear on that. He did have concerns that if he wasn't able to share that information with councillors, that you would not be able to reach a positive decision, and that he didn't want to see this voted down without him getting a chance to share his information. So we shared that information by email, and it was addressed at the briefing last night.
One other small question. It's stated that there would be a 3 metre wide, the wording was right of way, which could be used by people and vehicles. My concern is 3 metres would not be safe to use with vehicles, so should we be removing that comment that it could be used by vehicles? 3 metres is, yes, is wider than a vehicle, but if guessing what the terrain is probably like and what the surface is like, you would be struggling to probably keep a vehicle within that 3 metre right of way. So it's probably barely usable, and at least 5 metres would be something that would be more akin to what would be functioning if it is going to be used as a vehicle right of way, which is what it stated in the report.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So the access handle there was in response to both the fisheries comments but also the adjoining owner to the west. They have vehicle access along that strip there, and that was to accommodate their formed driveway at the moment. So it's not necessarily a full 5 metres that's required to get to the rear for a vehicle, but to maintain the access there to the adjoining property. So it still provides access to get to the riverbank and use that rear portion, the riparian corridor. But the primary reason for the access handle in terms of vehicles was to maintain the access to the adjoining property to the west.
So there is in fact a formed driveway there, so 3 metres should be should be acceptable, but it would be quite tight.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll check through the process, just to confirm with a detailed survey that it's all picked up within that 3 metres.
Yeah, because 3 metres, like they could drive a car down there and up, but they wouldn't be able to reverse a trailer or something. Or most people wouldn't be able to reverse a trailer or anything like that. But as long as there is adequate space for a vehicle to use, and we're saying that it's a formed driveway, but that doesn't come out in the report.
Councillor Horville.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I'd like to ask a question of Acting Director, please, on the letter from the Department of Primary Industries and the Fisheries Management Officer, Kate Martin, sent to us on the 10th of July. And I already know the answer, but I think it should go on the public record. The letter that we received on that date said that Fisheries New South Wales strongly believes that the road marked on the map provided should be retained for anglers and the general public. It appears that Council then followed through on that letter and changed it. So could you explain how that process went, Acting Director?
Yep, so the initial map, if you have a look at attachment 1, is what accompanied the application, and then we go through a process where we public exhibition and submissions come in. This was one of the submissions that came from a state agency. Following the submissions that came in, the proposal was revised. If you have a look at attachment 2, and you can see that there's the access handle that was amended to include that, and the riparian corridor, the area adjacent to the river there, was removed from the application as well.
And my second question, Acting Director, is from the Council report on page 33, and it is part of the submission from the adjacent landowner on the western side of the land, and addresses the loss of access and decrease in property value. The comment is part of a circular driveway in use by an adjoining landowner may fall within the road sought for closure. This would need to be determined by a detailed survey. So my question is, can we vote in favour of this without first knowing what the detailed survey would look like?
Yeah. So, based on the information we've got available at the moment, that includes a survey from Mark Rogers, which the applicant's since provided after reviewing the submissions. We're comfortable that it will be retained within that. There could be, when we actually go to publish, there'll be a more detailed survey, and we'll just confirm that there's no small areas that need to be accommodated. So we're generally comfortable that it can be accommodated within that 3 metre width.
Okay, and will this be communicated with the submitter on the adjoining joining land?
Yes, so the amended plan has been provided to that, the submitter to the west, and
Yep.
there's been no further comments received.
Okay, so he's or he or she is satisfied. Yeah. Thank you very much for those answers.
Some flexibility if need be, varying that width to accommodate that drive.
It would only be a small variation. We're comfortable. It's just if you overlay the state cadastral and the aerial, doesn't align at that point. So we'll need to have a more detailed survey done.
There is the flexibility with the opponent to vary that margin if
Yep.
need be.
Yep. I understand, yes.
No problems.
So, could I ask, Councillor Morris, are you still moving to defer?
No.
No? Okay. Because I would have seconded it. Yep. All answered. Thank you.
I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation, all against the recommendation. The recommendation has been carried. 9.9. Someone wants to... So it was pulled out. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Morris. It's been seconded. It's been pulled out for some reason.
So I did, Madam Mayor.
You want to change the recommendation?
No, I want to ask a question about it and then possibly change it, Madam Mayor.
And the question?
The question is the application that was determined at the previous council meeting, which I was unable to attend, approved the development that was higher than the KLEP height allowed. Could you tell me how much higher than the in that area was that building? Because I missed the briefing. It says 11 metres building height on page 41. What was the actual height above the allowed limit?
Sorry? Thank you, Director. Acting Director. Got an answer?
I think so. So I'm just having a look at the report there. So the development requirement was 11 metres, and it was a 50% variation. It says in the description below that width, but it doesn't give the overall.
16.5 metres, it says it on page 41.
Excellent. So that's it. So the requirement is 11 metres, and the building height 16.5. You're right.
So it's 5.5 metres taller.
Yep.
But my question is, and it also relates to the Crescent Head development, do other developers, or are they able to use these decisions by council as a precedence to go over the KLEP height limits?
It's certainly something that we have to look at. If there's a development requirement or a development standard that's being varied often, then council should at some point go back and review whether that's the right standard. There will always be instances where strict compliance is just not reasonable. So it's a matter of just getting the balance right.
Okay, so in this regard, and the decision was made last council, as I mentioned, there is no need for us to proceed like we have with the other development that's been passed today, or the KLEP amendments for the developments at South West Rocks. That was a variation to the KLEP. At what point does planning say we need to put a permanent variation in and change the KLEP?
Yeah. So each year we go back and do a bit of a review and have a look at all of the variations for that year, and we'll start to say, okay, how's that aligning with the strategies? Because it's quite important that you're delivering on the strategy that you set out to deliver on as well. So we just need to make sure that we're still delivering on the strategy, but also allowing a bit of flexibility in the system for where strict compliance would be unreasonable.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is on page 42, if I may ask. And it's in the graph, and it says that there have been number of DAs determined within 40 days. It's got 81. Total number of DAs determined 113, and that's a 71% or 71.6% success of being within 40 days. In the previous year, to date, it was running at 80.9%, 80.9%. So what is causing the extra delays? We're not keeping up with the targets that we were hoping to have in determining within 40 days. Is it staffing? Is there some problem with planning? If you think you can explain why the number of, or the percentage of approvals in 40 days has decreased.
I would have to take that one on notice. It can be a number of different variables. It could be number of applications, it could be staffing, so I'd have to take it on notice to have a look at.
Target anyway, 70%?
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Interested to know what the target is.
So do I have an amendment?
No, I think the answers have been quite clear.
Is there?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Is there any debate? I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? Or the next one that was removed was 9.10, yeah? Statement of cash and investment. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Horval wants to change the recommendation.
Yes, Madam Mayor, could I have an answer on the attachment, please, on the graph? I'm trying to find it now. Investment performance chart. Is it possible for that to be put up, or? And I guess I'm asking the Acting General Manager this question. I think I know the answer. The factors that show that we are nearly $80,000 below the budgeted expectation for income from investment, what is the explanation for that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this was covered in the briefing last night, and I think it's covered in the report. That's just the effects of lower interest rates that are actually being achieved than what was actually assumed in the budget. The budget was set in relation to this item at the beginning of this calendar year, and so assumed higher rates than what we're actually achieving, and so it's just a direct outcome of that.
And again, from last night, but I think it should be put on the public record, there's a plan, I believe, that you have of adjusting that expectation for during every quarter report. Is that correct? And how would that affect this graph?
Yep, through you, Madam Mayor. That's listed in the report as well, that we will, at every quarterly budget review, do a review of all of our line items, and including this one. And so, as we did last year, where the reverse impact occurred, where the actual results were better than budget, we will adjust that to align, and therefore once those are approved by council and the quarterly budget review is adopted by council, then the chart will be updated to reflect that.
And that's going to happen anyway, so we don't need, as a council, to give you direction to undertake that as a direction?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, that's not necessary.
Okay, thank you very much, Acting General Manager.
I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against? That's been carried. Questions? Councillor Morris. You know, you do know that you always have the option of just sending in councillor recommending. Oh, excuse me, I've got frog in my throat. Councillor Horval.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I had questions, but I've been wiped out by technology. I've had them in drafts, ready to be emailed through to Manager Thorogood, and they've disappeared from my draft thing. So I'm wondering whether some sort of update to my iPad has done this, but as you said, I can email them in when I redo them, if that's possible.
You can, and they come in as questions that are councillor questions that are answered through as we go.
Thank you, Madam
And
Mayor.
they also then have the potential of being addressed earlier if they're operational. Councillor Saul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one question, if I may. what is the process for having a road placed on the 10-year roadworks program?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two questions. First question being the location of the return and earn collection bay in town. Has the issues of littering been addressed, and is this the best location? Town. And the second question is the Southwest Rocks Road, when is it on the roads program between Kinchela and Southwest Rocks? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We now need a motion to go back into confidential. Thank you, Councillor Morris. Seconded by Councillor Patterson. I now need to have the gallery emptied, and we'll go in